Hello everyone, my name is Zach Deloach. I'm the Safety and Compliance Manager for Pac-Van. Today we're going to be discussing the Hazardous Communication Program. This training program is designed to inform employees of the hazards that are associated with chemicals in the workplace. In addition, we'll teach employees how to safely handle, use, and dispose of chemicals that they commonly use. We'll also explain how to detect the presence of chemicals in the workplace, as well as protective methods that can be utilized to ensure the safety of all workers. This program applies to all Pac-Van employees who work with or near hazardous chemicals, as well as any chemicals that Pac-Van employees may be using under normal conditions or in a foreseeable emergency. All employees are responsible for adhering to the content of the Pac-Van Hazardous Communication Safety Program. More detailed responsibilities are spelled out in the written program itself. The first thing we'll discuss is a list of branch expectations. First, all branches must maintain a list of all chemicals that they have on site. Each entry on this list must have the name of the manufacturer and the chemical at a minimum. This list is to be maintained as an index in each SDS binder. Non-routine tasks do not occur on a frequent basis or as part of an employee's normal workday. Before starting a non-routine task, contact the safety department for help evaluating hazards and creating a plan. All employees involved in performing a non-routine task will be informed of all potential hazards they may encounter, as well as safe work procedures established to mitigate these risks. Branches that share their workspace with other companies or perform work with contractors are required to share their HazCom plans with these other parties. Branch or fleet managers should ensure that they exchange copies of HazCom policies and procedures and ensure that these procedures are enforced with all employees, regardless of who they work for. Additional details are contained within the written policy. This is an example of a shipping label that would come on a chemical drum delivered to the branch. Whenever chemicals are delivered, branch or fleet managers should ensure that this label is present and legible. If this label becomes worn or damaged, new labels must be ordered from the manufacturer or supplier. The label must contain all of the items you see listed here on the screen. The product identifier is a trade name, generic name, or manufacturer code that identifies this individual chemical. This product identifier should match the SDS sheet you have in the SDS binder. Signal words are used to indicate the relative level of severity of a hazard. This section will read danger, warning, or be blank. Danger is the most severe, warning is somewhat less severe, and blank indicates lower hazard chemicals that are relatively safe. Hazard statements describe the nature and degree of the hazards. For example, it may read, causes kidney damage through prolonged exposure when absorbed through skin. Hazard pictograms will be discussed on the next slide. Precautionary statements describe recommended measures that should be taken to minimize or prevent harm. The four types of precautionary statements are prevention, response, storage, and disposal. Finally, the name, address, and telephone number of the manufacturer or shipper must be provided. Employees should familiarize themselves with the information on this label before using a chemical. Hazard pictograms are graphic symbols used to communicate specific information about the hazards of a chemical. OSHA requires that these pictograms be used on all shipping containers for chemicals. These pictograms are utilized and recognized internationally. Employees should be familiar with these pictograms and what they mean in order to better understand the hazards a chemical poses at a glance. A secondary container is any container that a chemical is transferred into that did not come directly from the manufacturer. All secondary containers must be labeled to include the chemical name, the common or trade name if applicable, the manufacturer name, and a completed National Fire Protection Association symbol to communicate hazards. It is highly recommended that branches purchase and utilize peel and stick NFPA secondary container labels to meet this labeling requirement. The image on the screen is an example of this type of label. The information to complete these labels can be found on the shipping label or the SDS sheet. The NFPA symbol allows employees using chemicals in secondary containers to see the hazards associated with the chemical in a clean, concise format. Employees should familiarize themselves with what each section and number means. The blue diamond indicates a health hazard. A 0 written in this square indicates no unusual hazard, and increases up to a 4, which indicates that short exposure can be fatal. The red diamond indicates a fire hazard. A 0 means the chemical is not combustible, while a 4 indicates that the chemical is extremely flammable. The yellow diamond indicates how reactive a chemical is. A 0 means the chemical is stable, while a 4 indicates that it is explosive at room temperature. The white diamond is reserved for special warnings, such as radioactive chemicals. This box is seldom used, and Pac-Van employees will not encounter it in the course of their normal work. Branches are required to maintain safety data sheets for all chemicals on site. Note that SDS replaced the MSDS acronym in 2015. All SDS sheets should be combined into a 3-ring binder, as this will allow branches to quickly add or remove SDS sheets as chemical inventories change. There should be 2 identical binders. One should be maintained in the shop area, while the other is maintained in the office. In addition, a special SDS binder should be created for service trucks that contains SDS sheets for all chemicals on that vehicle. This allows employees in the field to quickly and easily reference SDS materials. The location of SDS binders should be clearly marked. In addition, SDS binders must be available to employees at all times during working hours. It should never be stored in a locked office or restricted area. As discussed earlier, the list of all chemicals on site should double as the index for the SDS binders. Anytime a new chemical is brought into the branch, the SDS should be added to all binders. The list of chemicals should also be updated. If the SDS isn't provided with the chemical, you can find it online or request it directly from the manufacturer or supplier. The new chemical should not be used until the SDS binder is updated and all employees have been trained on the hazards of the new chemical. Reading and understanding an SDS sheet requires employees to know what each section of the SDS should contain. The Hazardous Communication Safety Program contains an in-depth explanation of each section of the SDS sheet. All 8 sections listed here are required to be on all SDS sheets. Sections 12 through 15 are not mandatory. Chemical manufacturers may complete these sections, but they are not required to do so by OSHA regulation. Section 16 is a catch-all for additional information. It's typically where employees will find the NFPA symbol ratings for their secondary container labels. Whenever a new employee is assigned to work with chemicals, or a new chemical is introduced to the workplace, certain training requirements must be met. These training requirements ensure that employees can safely use a chemical and protect themselves from harm. Employees must be informed of any monitoring that is being conducted, such as continuous monitoring devices to detect certain types of hazardous chemicals. Employees must also be trained on how to detect the presence of chemicals, including physical characteristics such as odors, visual appearances, or physical reactions. Employees must be made aware of any chemical-specific procedures that exist, safe work practices, and emergency procedures that are in place, as well as any PPE requirements when working with chemicals. Finally, all employees must review and understand the labeling system and the SDS sheet for each new chemical prior to performing work. All chemicals should be stored in accordance with Section 7 of their SDS sheet to prevent unintended spills or exposures. If a minor spill occurs, branches should have spill kits available for employees to clean up. The employees should notify the branch or fleet manager of the spill and reference Sections 6 and 13 of that chemical's SDS to properly clean up and dispose of minor spills. If a major spill occurs, the building should be evacuated immediately. Contact emergency services and provide the location, type of hazardous chemical, and a list of any injuries that occurred. A major spill requires notification of the branch or fleet manager as well as the safety department. If an employee is exposed to a hazardous chemical and is injured, ensure medical attention is provided immediately. Provide a copy of the SDS sheet for the chemical they were exposed to medical personnel. If anyone witnessed the exposure, they should inform medical personnel of when, where, and how the chemical was being used. Notify the branch or fleet manager and the safety department. The bottom line is that Pac-Van employees must be incredibly cautious when working with hazardous chemicals. All chemical containers must be marked in order to properly communicate the hazards that chemical poses. All SDS binders must be up to date at all times. A chemical should never be used until an SDS sheet is included in the binder. All employees should understand how to handle, store, and use a chemical they're working with. They should also be confident in how to respond to a spill or exposure. Consult with the safety department before beginning any hazardous, non-routine tasks. This program is not intended to be all-inclusive. Employees should read and understand the Pac-Van Hazardous Communication Safety Program before submitting their training acknowledgement form. Any questions or comments can be referred to your supervisor or myself at the contact information listed on your screen. Thank you for your time and stay safe.